Hey everybody, Jeremiah Clark with Lowrance Electronics. I'm out here in the shop again. Is the third part of a continuation of our Lowrance Live webinar series and in support of our hashtag Anglers Unite social media initiative for those of us that can get on the water to share stories, to share tips and tricks, to kind of keep morale boosted for those of us that can't get on the water, you know, in these tough times. So, you know, in my line of business, as long as I've been doing this, my favorite thing to do is actually get out and fish, but when I can't get out and fish, my second favorite thing to do is talk about fishing, and in particular with what I do, to talk about marine electronics. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the third part of our series today. We're going to talk today about the HDS Live. So in the first two episodes of our series, Lucas Stewart covered the Ghost trolling motor. Last week we talked about hook reveal, and this week we're going to talk about HDS Live. Specifically, basically, what do you get in the box? Some quick install tips and setup tricks. I'm going to kind of walk you through taking it, you know, what do you have from out of the box to basic setup in your garage. Next week we're going to do a continuation of this episode, or the product line of HDS Live, and we're going to go into more use case tips and tricks. Today again is going to be more setup, more install, more of those kind of things. I do want to say to everybody on the line right now that we have the Lowrance product team and product specialist standing by to answer your questions in the live chat. So please fire those questions off. If there's a question that we miss, at the end of this, we're going to do a Q&A of commonly asked questions. The guys are going to send me through some on my screen here that I can see. And we'll also be sending out a survey to see how you thought the series is going, what do you thought the information, but as part of that survey, you're going to have the option to ask a question that you maybe got missed in the live chat or didn't get brought up in the live Q&A. Also, as kind of an incentive for you guys to hang around, at the very end of this session, we're going to have a live Lowrance trivia where I'm going to hold up an old Lowrance legacy unit, and the first 5 people that can tell me what unit that is are going to win a free hat from us. So just kind of a little incentive to stick around through the end and see the live Q&A part. So let's go ahead and hop right in. So this week we are talking about the HDS Live product family. HDS Live is the ultimate fishing system. It is the top tier of the Lowrance portfolio. For those that joined us last week, they basically, we talked about the hook reveal and how that's our entry level, and how Lowrance as a brand has a good, better, best product lineup. And so we have the hook reveal at the entry level, we have Elite TI in the middle, and then we have HDS Live at the very top. And again, HDS Live is the ultimate fishing system. We just had a campaign around that. And when we say it's the ultimate fishing system, it means it's the best fish finder on the market. It's the best we can offer. It's the best charting, it's the fastest processor, the best screens, the best sonar technologies we have, you know, in side scan, down scan, 3D, live sight, and obviously conventional sonar that we've built our brand heritage off of. So it's the top tier of our portfolio, but one of the things that we like to hang our hat on is, especially in the United States, it is the #1 choice of tournament professionals in the top bass and top walleye series. And when I say it's a #1 choice, more professionals use Lowrance than all other brands combined. So if these guys trust their paychecks, their weekends to this, I have no problem going out and putting one on my boat and trusting that it's going to do just great for me as well. I don't know if you guys have seen pro fishermen, but they use things to the extreme. They test, they're good to know where you can find the breaking point and what your quality is, and if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for you. So we're going to go ahead and hop in today into some basic installation and first time setup of an HDS Live system. And the first thing we're going to do is talk about what's in the box. And I know you guys can go online and see this, but for those of you that have never opened an HDS box or installed an HDS, I kind of want to show you what you'll get when you get one. And this isn't like an unboxing video where I'm going to go through every single piece in detail. I just kind of want to give you guys a basic rundown of what you'll get and what it does, and we'll talk a little bit more about the actual install here in just a second. So the main thing you're paying for, obviously, is the display, right? So this one is an HDS 12. You know, in the box you're going to get your bright new shiny display, no fingerprints, no scratches, just nice, fresh and clean. On the front we have a full touchscreen. Down the right-hand side we have a full keypad. We'll go through some of these as we start, maybe some button pushing in a little bit. We have designed this product to be used as a full keypad or a full touchscreen product. So you can interact with it however you feel best. I find myself actually using both the keypad and the touchscreen in different scenarios and different situations. Then we turn it around and we're going to go through this in a little bit more detail on the back, but all the connectors. So you have your display. This is a 12. You know, I have a couple different ones to look at. So this is the 9-inch that we have. And then we also have this in a 7 and a 16. So you have your display. You also have the sun cover. And this is more of a storage cover. This is to keep the sun when the boat's sitting in a marina or sitting on the trailer. If you don't have a boat cover, you don't take your units off. This is to keep the sun from baking this expensive screen. It also helps keep scratches and dust and debris off. But one thing, if you look at the inside of the screen, the sun cover when you get one, it says face cover must be removed when the vehicle is traveling at speed. We make these where they stay on pretty tight. Most of us in the business, we actually travel with our sun covers on, but we fold the units down so they're not exposed. One thing you'll see is when I go down the water and I see somebody with their sun cover sitting up on their unit, I think that thing has a chance of blowing off. So if you're going to leave the sun cover on when you travel, make sure you fold the unit down so the sun cover's not going to fly off. The next in the box, and this depends on which version you buy, is the transducer. So we sell HDS with the active imaging 3-in-1, which is conventional sonar, down scan, and side scan all in one transducer. We also sell it as a no transducer variant, and that's commonly for people that are installing into a boat like what I'm sitting on now that has maybe a glassed-in puck, or if you wanted to pick a slightly different sonar technology for the saltwater guys that maybe don't necessarily want or need side scan, but they may want a higher-end transducer like maybe like an Airmar. Or if you already have a transducer on your boat, you can get the HDS without a transducer. So this is like an example of a transducer that's glassed into the bottom of the boat, or sometimes can be put on the bottom of a trolling motor. And we'll show some transducer mounts here in just a second. The next thing we'll talk about, obviously, you get a bracket. This bracket on the larger screens is made of aluminum, and it's powder coated. On the 7s and 9s, it's actually very robust ABS plastic. But if you see on the bottom of this, there's several different sets of mounting holes. Mainly that's to go on a lot of the different aftermarket style brackets, so like a Ram bracket or something like that, that already are pre-drilled for those mounting holes. Or if you're mounting it straight down to a dash, you have a few places to choose from. But yeah, so you get the mounting holes on the outside, you have the big hole in the middle that you could drill a hole to run your cables up through. And then it's got, the ratcheting teeth for mounting. With that bracket, you also have the knobs. So obviously those come in the box with the bracket. You have the power cable that comes in with the bracket, which, not much unique about a power cable, except for I will talk about some of the wiring of this. On this power cable that comes with an HDS, we have 2 sets of wires. So we have the set on the right, which are red, black, and yellow, which are your power. And you have the set on my left, which are green, blue, yellow, orange, and a bare wire, a silver wire, which are for NMEA 0183. NMEA 0183 is not used as much anymore, so we actually ship these with these wires clipped off. But if you were trying to connect to an older VHF radio, maybe some older autopilots, some older things like that that still use NMEA 0183, we do have that capability, but by default, this feature's turned off, and we clip these wires flush. The 3 that really you'll need to worry about, or you'll need to connect up when you go to install the product, are the power wires. And I say 3, really it's usually 2. I'll kind of fold this guy off to the side. So with the power wires, you have red is 12 volt plus, black is 12 volt ground or 12 volt minus. The yellow wire on an HDS display is a low voltage output, and that's basically used if you're connecting to a sonar module, a structure scan 3D, a sonar hub, or any of these older, like if you have an older structure scan module on the boat, and you're wanting to turn that module on and off with the display. This wire is what we call the trigger wire. This turns the boxes on and off. In a lot of boats these days, you're not seeing this wire connected, and you're seeing the actual modules, trigger wires hooked up to a switch on the dash. So when you turn the accessories on, you're turning your modules on. So depending on your install and what all you're installing, you may or may not need this yellow wire. If you're installing only HDS units that have built-in side scan, down scan, and sonar, and you're not actually adding an aftermarket or an add-on box, you'll just leave this wire, it's trimmed flush, there's no exposed end, you'll just leave it unconnected. One thing we've seen some people do through our service group, and we do not recommend doing, do not tie this red wire and this yellow wire to the same power source. This is voltage input. This is voltage output. You do not want to tie those to the same circuit. So if you're not using the yellow wire to switch something on or off, just clip it or tie it back and leave it out of the way. So that's my quick intro on the power cable. The other thing I want to talk about is when you install it, we ship it with a clip-on fuse or a cramp-on fuse. Always, always, always protect your electronics power wires with a fuse or a breaker. Every piece of electronics you buy for a 12-volt system is going to come with a fuse, and I often see people installing stuff without the fuses. The fuses protect the wire that you're running, and they protect the circuit that this is connected to, and more importantly, they also protect the device itself. So if you get a power surge, you get something else in your lines, you want the fuse to burn up, not the wire, and definitely not your HDS you just spent thousands of dollars on. So always mount the fuse. I'll talk a little bit more about wiring practices here in just a second. Still kind of just going through the what's in the box phase. Also with that, you get a little fuse. So this one, being a 12-inch, is a 5-inch or a 5-amp fuse. The 7s and 9s come with a 3-amp fuse, and then we give you a connector in there to wire that up. Another one that we see a lot of, got too much with my handful there, is people, we ship these little connectors, and there's a whole bag full of connectors in the box. And we have 2 yellow ones, 1 small black one, 1 larger black one, and then we have on the 12s and 16s these 2 firm, hard plastic connectors. What those do is they go on the back of your HDS. If you're not using one of these connectors, and I'll talk again a little bit more in detail of what these connectors are in a second, but if you're not using the connectors, if you have a 12-inch or a 16, and you're not using the HDMI or the USB, put these connectors on. What these do is they prevent these connectors from actually corroding. Actually, as the unit sits there powered on, you can keep these actually have voltage sitting on them. So if you're not using Ethernet, you're not using NMEA, you're not using USB or HDMI on the large screens, use the covers. So those are in the box for that reason. Now, if you do want to take this off and connect an HDMI up into it, that's fine. But if you're going to go to store it and you don't leave that cable on the boat, when you take it off, put the connector back on. These are to seal those connectors up so they don't get any corrosion on them. And the last thing I want to talk about that comes in the box, and then I'll use this as a transition to mounting styles and how to mount. We give you 4 pretty small diameter, I think these are number 6 or number 8 screws, about 1.25 inches long. And these are for actually if you're going to dash mount the unit, or if you're going to mount it directly to a dash. So there are a couple different ways you can mount an HDS unit. The most common that you'll have is bracket mounted, so we ship it with the bracket. But if you see, I can pop this front bezel off, and now I have 4 mounting screws, 1 in each corner. So if I wanted to actually flush dash mount this, or put it right into my dash, which on this boat I actually have a 7 in the dash and a 16 on an exterior bracket. So a lot of boats are doing that different ways. We actually give you these screws to bolt it straight to the dash. Once you put those screws in and you get the unit nice and secured, the bezel just clips right back on. And you can hear it click when it goes on, so you know it's on there. And now you don't have any ugly screw holes showing. So nice clean install. The product will only sit about, a little over 1/4 inch off the dash. Really super clean, super low profile. So that kind of wraps up the what's in the box part, and it kind of does get us into our next section of how and where to mount. So we've already talked about you can bracket mount or you can dash mount a unit. Again, depending on your kind of boat and depending on the kind of space you have, the age of your boat. So this is a 2006 Triton. In 2006, a standard fish finder in a dash was a 5-inch, right? So we have a 7 that we can barely fit in here, but there's no way this big 16 is going to fit inside the dash. So again, it depends on the boat, on your mounting options, but the most common for a boat like this is you'll see usually 1 in or on the console, maybe 1 off the side, or in newer boats, they're going to like more of a bridge style mount right over all the gauges, and you'll actually have multiple units or 1 big unit or multiple smaller units sitting upright in front of you. But again, bracket mount, flush mount, those are both the options you have right out of the box, and it's just a matter of which one fits your application. And then it's common on a bass boat to have 1 at the bow and 1 at the console and 1 at the bow, or 2 at the bow. to at the console. So really the where and the how just kind of depends on your application and you know, what kind of screens you're looking to put on there. So the last thing we want to talk about that come in the box is the one thing that even me personally, I'm going to be a hypocrite here and tell you that these are in the box for you and for your knowledge. These are the manuals. Usually when I open a product, I consider myself pretty tech savvy and I only go to the manual when I need to. And that's fine. You know, if you're pretty tech savvy or if you're a good fish finder user, you don't necessarily have to jump right in and read the whole manual. I probably even wouldn't do it even if I wasn't. But what I would like for you guys to look at when you get here before you get in trouble is we have a quick start guide. It's basically a one sheet, fold out sheet that tells you how to do the basic functions of the products. A lot of the stuff we're going to cover next week. So either watch next week and memorize everything we say, or when you buy an HDS, remember that we have the quick start guide in the box. All right, so let's do a rundown of what are all the connectors, what do they do, why do we have so many, you know, what are they used for, what do I need to know? And the first thing we're going to talk about is the power, right? So the power connector right here, that's what we just showed the power cable for. That's this guy right here. And so one thing you'll notice is that we color code our connectors. The red one plugs into the red hole, nice and easy. In this power cable, so we talked about the power cable comes with power and it comes with NMEA 2000. Over this connector, we also have the ability via an optional, an accessory cable to run video in. So if you wanted to do a live well camera, an underwater camera, a backup camera, I've seen some guys putting cameras on the cowlings of their motor so when they blast off for a tournament, they don't have to look behind them. You could put that directly in here with an optional cable we sell that is the exact same connector as this. It plugs right in, your power cable plugs into that. We also have on HDS Live 2 different sonar connectors, and you notice they're color coded. Again, the transducer itself is color coded to match the plug on the back of the unit. On the outside, well, let's start on the blue connector. So the blue connector is what we call channel 1 when you look at the software of the product. So channel 1 is primarily for traditional sonar. You could plug an HDI in here if you wanted to, but this is really where if you had an in-hole puck, you would plug it into channel 1, or this is where LiveSight plugs into on our products as well. So this is not just a regular sonar connector that we've had in the past, even though it can still run regular sonar. So this is basically, think about this is your in-hole puck, a trolling motor transducer, an HDI if you wanted to, or this is where you plug in LiveSight. If you have LiveSight, it has to go on the blue connector. This part of a LiveSight transducer is blue, blue to blue, red to red. So channel 2 is the black connector. This is what you're used to seeing on your HDS Carbons, your HDS Gen 3s, and your HDS Gen 2 touches. This is side scan, down scan, and conventional sonar. There are 2 conventional sonar channels in here. So again, some of our coastal friends, they'll run 2 different frequency or 2 different angle conventional sonar transducers directly into the back of this, so they could have a different view of regular sonar. The most common application you'll see in inland, like in a bass boat or in a walleye type boat, is side scan and down scan on this side. And then if they have a skimmer or an in-hole puck mounted here, or if you're on a trolling motor, you could connect your regular your trolling motor transducer here for depth, for like on a Ghost we have HDI built in, so you could get traditional sonar and down scan, and then you would connect your LiveSight right here. So I'm going to have to take off all these caps I just put on, but I'll pop these off and I'll keep walking through this with you. So the next one we have, and you'll notice on HDS with the exception of the 7-inch, are these 2 yellow connectors. On an HDS we only have 1. These are Ethernet. People always ask me, what's the difference in Ethernet and NMEA 2000? And part of this is I'm going to go and not only explain what the connectors are, but some of those differences. If you think of Ethernet, it is high bandwidth video type images, right? So this is where we share live sonar. This is where we share chart cards. This is if you're a big boat coastal guy, this is where your radar comes in, your weather comes in. But also over Ethernet, we do live waypoint routes and tracks syncing. So if I make a waypoint at the console, it sends it in real time to the unit at the bow. I go to the bow, I want to change the name or change the symbol, it sends that change back to the console. So it's a live sync. The reason on the 12s and 16s and 9s we actually have 2 connectors is, again, in this boat, I have 2 units at the console, right? So I have one in the console and one bolted to the side. I don't have to have a hub, a network hub, for connecting these units up. I could actually daisy chain these together. So I can pull my cable from the bow and plug it in here, and then I can take the output of this and pop it right over to my other unit on the console. The other thing is I could actually, if I had a standalone installation, if I'm just running maybe like a center console boat and I just have one big screen at the dash, but I wanted you know, a network sounder. So if I had Structure Scan 3D hooked up and I wanted Sirius XM weather, I have 2 ports. Again, I don't have to buy a hub. Everything plugs in right here. So again, Ethernet, just remember Ethernet is video. It's high speed, it's high bandwidth. It's when we're sharing big data files like sharing Sonar from unit to unit, that's going over Ethernet. NMEA 2000, the other network on our units. NMEA 2000, think of that as low bandwidth. That's more data. So that's GPS position. That's temperatures from temp sensors. Basically, if you have a sensor, whether it's a GPS puck, your engine's connected, so the Mercury engine on this boat connected to this display, and I can see my RPMs and fuel flow. A live well temperature sensor, my audio, so with our HDS units, you can control a lot of aftermarket stereos or even our own sonic hub. And obviously things like Ghost trolling motor, motor guide XI5 connection, those data type connections are all coming over NMEA 2000. And I'm gonna go ahead and put the unit down for a second, and we talked about Ethernet in terms of how to wire it. It's pretty simple, it's point to point. One of the more common questions we always get, or one of the biggest questions and outstanding questions we have in service is what is NMEA 2000? How's it wired up? Why doesn't my network work? You know, that's the hardest thing for us to do remotely is troubleshoot bad networks. And NMEA 2000 is a bit tricky. This is an industry standard. This isn't something that Lowrance just said, let's connect up this way. This is the way we think it works. This is a marine industry standard. And it's been around probably in practical application since about 2005. So we're a decade and a half into having this type of architecture, but it's probably one of the most commonly messed up networking things we see on a boat. So I just want to take a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and walk through what is a NMEA network, how does it lay out. If you're starting from scratch, how do you install one? There are a few things that a NMEA network needs. One is it needs what NMEA refers to as a backbone. And that's, just think of everything in this line, whether it's one of these plastic tees, whether it's a cable, or going to another plastic tee, everything across the top of this straight line is the backbone. So that is where, you know, from one end of the boat to the other end of the boat, let's imagine that one of my right hand, this is up at your bow, and the one on my left hand is stashed underneath your console, and your boat's wired up this way. So you have to have a backbone. Each device, and when I say device, I mean HDS unit, point one, Ghost trolling motor, JL audio stereo. Each device plugs into its own T. And all devices plug in from the bottom. So devices in the bottom, backbone at the top. T to T up top, device in the bottom. The network itself has to have at each end a network terminator. So when you buy a NMEA kit, you get a male and a female terminator. This basically goes after your last T in the network, you mount the terminator. So I've got one on one end right here. I've got one at the other end. You have to have both ends terminated. And then, this is a departure from the very early days, but it's been this way at least since we started HDS. NMEA networks are not powered from your display. NMEA networks are powered from their own 12-volt power source. So this is positive and negative. Hook it up to the accessory switch on your boat, hook it up to a fuse panel on your boat. This is the power for all of your network devices. Your point one gets its power from right here. It doesn't get it from the HDS. And the thing to remember with the power, especially on a larger boat install, is to put the power as close to the middle of the backbone as you can. So that's the quick primer on NMEA 2000 on what data it shares. Again, remember, it's sensor data. It's low bandwidth, but make sure, and there's documents and videos online all about this. I think we probably even have some in the Lowrance YouTube section of how to build and install a proper NMEA network. But for those of you that are installing a boat unit system from scratch, or for those of you that are adding a Ghost trolling motor and don't have a NMEA network, make sure you do a little bit of research and get these, get this laid out right. A lot of your problems, if you don't get this right, or a lot of your problems in networks can be solved just by the proper layout of the actual connections and the devices. Devices at the bottom, everything else in the backbone along the top. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I'll bring my trusty 12-inch back up here, is on the back of 12s and 16s, behind these caps I told you to use if you're not connecting this features, we actually have an HDMI input and a USB. And the goal behind these was basically to be able to take your phone or tablet and put that screen directly on top of, or directly onto your chart screen via the video panel. So one thing we've seen a lot of people do is they'll want maybe a Google Maps view, or they'll want to use a third-party charting software that doesn't run in an MFD, and so they'll put a cup holder, or they'll drop their phone in a cup holder. They'll put a RAM mount on their dash, but your phones, your iPads, your tablets are not super daylight viewable. They're not very battery efficient, and most importantly, they're not waterproof. So what we've done is we've given you the ability to, if you still want to run those apps, you still want to run those devices, you can do that. You just go buy whatever adapter your phone or tablet sells for connecting up to the port. So this is for an iPhone or an iPad. And this adapter itself has connections at the bottom for HDMI and USB charging. So we didn't want to just give you the ability to plug in a USB or an HDMI video and have your phone or your tablet die after 3 hours of it trying to grind away on GPS with the screen turned on. So our USB actually has enough current to charge a standard tablet or a large format phone. Again, HDMI video input, and then that just plugs into the bottom of your phone or your tablet. You could stash it away somewhere else, and then that's all right there. All you have to do is go on screen and tap the video panel, and your phone will mirror to this device. So you could actually set it up as a split screen to show our charting in one, to show Navionics charting in another, and to show Google Maps in the video input panel, so you could actually have the full picture. We did it for practical things like that, but what I've caught myself doing back when when sports still existed is like if I want to decide between watching the football game on a Saturday or going fishing, why not do both? I can have the game on in the lower corner of my unit while I can still see my graph. Some of my friends with kids, they'll plop the kid at the console with some cartoons streaming through the waterproof HDS screen. Gives them an extra hour of fishing that they normally wouldn't get when mom makes them take them out of the house. So those connections back there, super easy to set up. That kind of completes the rundown of the back of one of these. Again, remember, only the 12s and 16s have the HDMI input. The 7s and 9s do not. There just wasn't enough space in there to put all that stuff in it. So that's kind of the rundown of the back. Real quick, we have a camera set up below the boat that we have back here. Now this is a test boat, so a lot of companies, when you have to go work from home, they say, okay, take your laptop. Maybe they say take a monitor. Some companies may even be generous enough to say take a printer with you. Well, with Lowrance, we actually have a fleet of test boats, and since the office is closed, those test boats are sitting in people's garages and shops. So when you see underneath this boat, this is one of our workhorses. This is an old 2006 Triton that I think we've had the whole time. There are 3 different transducers mounted back there. Kind of forgive the angles a little bit. That's a GoPro. It kind of distorts the view. So they look like they're angled, but they're really not. But kind of wanted to give you an example on a boat like this, how and where to mount transducers. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those, some of the do's and don'ts of mounting a transducer. I can't actually see what you're seeing, but going from memory on this boat from our testing with it, is this boat is actually equipped with an active imaging 3-in-1, which should be all the way to the right-hand side of your screen. It's equipped with, on the very bottom of the pad or the step, with a structure scan 3D transducer, which looks a lot like an active imaging 3-in-1. And then off to the left side of this step, we actually have an HDI. And I kind of actually like it for this application, and one of the reasons I stuck the camera back there tonight was just so you guys could see on a typical bass boat with a step, where and how would I mount the transducer. So the active imaging 3-in-1 and the HDI transducers are both mounted with the brackets they came with. So we call them transom brackets. You don't actually have to stick them on a transom. On a lot of boats like this, you don't have the option to stick them on a transom. And then the 3D transducer is actually mounted using our flush mount hull mount bracket. All of these have been put where they are for specific reasons, and the spacing's for a specific reason. And that is the #1 service complaint, sonar related service complaint we have, and I talked about this if you guys watched the hook reveal session last week, is around when people say I have a bad sonar. I'll hear all the time, my sonar looks great and I'm sitting still, but as soon as I move at all, my picture's gone. And you know, people equate that to having a bad sonar. What that really is, that isn't a bad sonar, that's a bad transducer installation. Transducer and power are the two most critical things for installing a fish finder on a boat. You have to have your transducer when you mount it, it has to be in clean water flow. It has to be able to not have any air bubbles underneath it. So if you mount it underneath a chine or a strake or a break in the hull, even something as simple as mounting it behind a live well pickup where you get a little bit of turbulence. You ever always hear people talk about turbulence or cavitation? All that is just basically a way of saying there are air bubbles in the water. And I say this, and for people that have heard me give speeches on sonar before, they probably get really tired of hearing me say it, but it's kind of my mantra when it comes to sonar installation and quality sonar, is that sonar is phenomenal at shooting through water. If you get sonar with clean, uninterrupted water flow, you will have the best, cleanest sonar picture you can get. Sonar is terrible at shooting through air. If you get any air bubbles, any cavitation at all underneath the face of that transducer, you will lose bottom lock or get intermittent sonar. For those of you, go to our Lowrance.com, or Lowrance YouTube page. We actually have a video, and it was shot on an Elite TI, but it's the same concept of what can happen when you mount a transducer too high or too low on the transom. Again, something as simple as mounting them that high or that low can have a huge impact on their performance. I'm going to find this is my bracket that comes with an active imaging 3-in-1. And if you look at these slots right here, let me switch back over to this camera real quick, sorry. If you look at the slots on the bracket, you can see that I have a little over 1 inch of adjustment. The reason is, so there's a couple things you need to make sure when you're mounting a transducer that are very critical. One, again, is uninterrupted water flow. Two, make sure the transducer is parallel to the bottom of the water, the seafloor bottom, the lake bottom, whatever, not parallel to the bottom of your boat sitting on the driveway, not parallel to the trailer. The boat sitting on the trailer is very different than the boat sitting naturally in the water. So it needs to be parallel to the bottom of the water. And the other thing is it needs to be not tilted too far up or too far back. So if you tilt it too far down, a couple things can happen. If this is mounted on your transom like this, one, when you're at speed, chances of getting a cavitation air bubble under the face of that transducer go up, so it means that you lose sonar picture when you're driving. The other thing that happens is how many people have seen, when you look at a sonar picture, you guys know a sonar arc is supposed to be, nice and symmetrical. Fish comes into the cone, goes to the middle of the cone, fish goes out of the cone, you get an arch. Well, how many people have seen like an arch that looks like this, or an arch that looks like this? That's your transducer tilted too much one way or the other, and that can actually cause not a full sonar picture. So mounting it in clear water flow, mounting it at the right height, again, ideally you want the transducer parallel to the bottom of the water. Again, we have adjustments in the bracket that if you mount it a little too high or a little too low the first time, you still have about 1 inch of play in the mounting plate itself, so you just have to back the screws off and adjust that up and down. But transducer mounting is critical. The same goes for, and maybe even a little bit more importantly, if you're mounting a puck style or a pod style transducer in the hull. So these transducers are designed with a flat bottom. They're designed when you epoxy them down to shoot through fiberglass. They have to be solid fiberglass. It cannot be cored fiberglass. So if you have fiberglass and then a foam core and then fiberglass again, this will not shoot through. That foam core basically acts like a big silencer to that sonar signal. Another thing that's very important is don't put it over any supports or strakes. Basically an average boat hole, well, I'll say it's hard to say. A typical boat hole is anywhere between like 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick. Find a good flat spot, usually on a boat like on a bass style boat, kind of right in front of the gas tanks in the back third of the boat where there's a nice flat spot. That's where most manufacturers mount them. If you're mounting to a boat that's already had a transducer in there and the sonar worked well before, don't be afraid to stick this right next to the other transducer so long as they're both not hooked up. If you have two transducers both hooked up and they're sitting that close to each other, they'll interfere with each other when they're pinging. But if you had a good spot on the hole, stick it right next to it. one of the tricks I use when epoxying these to the inside of the hole is I use, we sell some 2-part epoxy, but basically I ask people to use not a fast dry epoxy, because fast dry epoxies can actually trap air bubbles as they cure. You want something that has a slower cure time. So people always ask me, how do I use a slower curing epoxy and not just get it to run all over the boat? And I go buy plumber's putty, like the same stuff you'd use if you're doing home plumbing projects, and I build a little dam. I put the transducer in there, and then I fill that dam up with epoxy, put a weight on top of my transducer so I know it's pushed down, and that's how I know I've got a good little spot for the transducer. A lot of other people use different things. I don't usually recommend squirt-on sealants or fast cure epoxies though. So the other thing, when I said there are 2 real things to a good sonar picture, one is transducer mounting, again, location, no air bubbles, height, level to the bottom of the water. The other one is power to the actual display itself. So commonly we'll hear people say, you know, or like especially if you want to, the most common one out there is trolling motor noise. My sonar picture looks great. As soon as I step on the pedal, my screen goes white. Well, that's electrical interference. So we're picking that up either through the power cables or radiated through the water. People will say, you know, you look at side scan and you'll see little dashes out to the side, little broken up lines that appear randomly. That is usually electrical interference as well. So electrical interference plays a big role in how, or not having electrical interference plays a big role in how clean and good and accurate your sonar picture actually is. The most common and the best way to avoid any interference, and I know this is the hard part of an install, is actually running cables from your mounting location directly to your starting battery. And that does usually mean pulling cable through the hole, which is not the most fun thing in the world. But that is the best way to get a cleanest sonar signal and the cleanest signal for your graph. Some people run them to breakers back in the back. Some people run them to the master breaker. When I say direct to the battery, I mean as direct to the battery as you can get. If you run it directly to the battery, you do have to make sure you turn the unit off every time you turn the boat off, or it's going to sit there and keep working while your boat's got its cover on it. So either if you go straight to the battery, make sure you turn your units off every time or unconnect them, or you could go straight to your master shutoff back in the bilge, but get as direct to the battery as you possibly can for a good clean sonar signal. The other thing that'll get you is a lot of boats, especially older boats, is like, again, this is an 06, and we've rewired this boat, so it's not bad, but a lot of older boats did not have enough wire gauge coming to the switch panels on the dash or the breaker panels underneath the dash to handle the constant current load. So what you see is you'll go to fire up the motor and your graph screens will flash or your graphs will turn off. The best way to avoid that is a direct connection to the battery with properly gauged wire. People ask me, what's the proper gauge wire? It depends on the length of the run. So a boat like this, usually 10 will get you. But you know, it's that whole electrical thing that the further you run a cable, the thicker that cable needs to be. So I would say on average, you know, use at least something like 10 gauge for a run like this. But if you're going to go much further than that, you know, there are all kinds of tables online that could say if you're pulling 3 amps over this distance, use this size cable. An HDS, like an HDS 16 like we have on this boat, pulls about 3.5 amps, almost 4 amps at full current draw, where an HDS 7's pulling about 1.5. So again, screen size, you know, if you run the screen on full backlight or whatever, all of those actually factor into how much power you're pulling from the battery, and all of that factors into the size of cable you should run. Excuse me. So yeah, that's basically the quick rundown of the overly short, overly simplified quick install tips. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into about 10 minutes worth of what do I see when I first turn the unit on. We can do a little bit of button pushing. I'm not going to get into too deep into features and functions and tips on how to use each page. We're going to actually cover that again next week for those of you that just joined us. Again, I'm sitting in the garage, I just got my new HDS installed. What do I need to do before I go to the lake? And so one of the first things we're gonna hop into is the first full power on. You see, I'll scoot back so we can change cameras here, and you don't have to look at the back of my big head, is when you first turn the unit on, you'll get the warning disclaimer screen. This unit obviously has been installed before, but I've reset it so it's back to factory defaults, and you'll see exactly what you'll see the first time you power on. First thing you'll see is start retail mode. Retail mode is exactly what it sounds like. It is a mode for demonstrating these on a retail counter. If I hit yes, it's going to run a slideshow, and it's going to demo a lot of the things that the product may or may not have. So what I'm going to do, I make sure that that's not enabled, make sure simulate's not enabled. I'll just start over here since retail mode kicked on. If you wait too long, it'll do that too. But I'm going to start from scratch, do a hard reset here. So you'll see exactly what it looks like right out of the box. So you get your power on screen, HDS Live. This is where the product itself is booting up. It's starting all of its processing. It's going out and checking the network for everything that's available. People ask, why don't these start up a little quicker? These are computers, and we are basically booting up a processor and memory and all kinds of these things that we're starting from scratch here. So once we get loaded up, you're going to see this is going to be my first time power on. So you get the accept screen. So this boat has, again, I said has Structure Scan 3D connected. When something's connected, our systems automatically find it and enable it, so I'm just going to clear that. So this is what you guys will see the first time. This is our legal disclaimer. Nobody's ever read it, I don't think. I don't even know if I have, but it's there because it's a legal disclaimer. It's important to probably read at least once. Start retail mode, no. Device configuration. So we talked about some of the things we get calls on that, are avoidable in setup, transducer install, poor power, poor wiring. This is actually probably one of the easiest things you can do that people skip, and then they wonder why their unit's not working or you can't get your temperature overlay or any of that kind of stuff. So the first thing I want to do is configure this device. And this is where I pick my miles, if my knots or my nautical miles or meters, depending on where I'm at around the globe and what system we're used to. I know miles per hour, feet, and Fahrenheit, so I pick that. The next question, are you going to use on a lake or are you going to use on a coastal body of water? This question is a little bit more important than it sounds, in that we're telling the fish finder, the sonar, what profile to load. So if I actually, when I'm trying to get bottom lock for the first time, or if I lose bottom lock, how deep should it be looking? If I'm setting this up to use in a lake where I never fish deeper than 60 feet versus setting this up to fish, off the coast of Florida where I can go anywhere from 50 to 500, 1,000 feet deep. That's the difference here. So I'm going to pick lakes because that's where I fish. And then we have a setting in here if you want to use this for regular fishing or ice fishing. You select that. Configuration is nearly complete. These settings and more can be changed anytime in the settings menu, so I hit finish. The next screen you're going to see, and we're going to have a pop-up interrupt us here in a second, is network. All data source selection will be performed. Connect and power up all network devices. This is also where I see a lot of just regular users hit cancel because they think, oh, this pop-up's annoying me. This pop-up's very important. So when I hit OK, looks like nothing happens other than I cleared a dialog. But what I've told this thing to do is go out and look at the entire boat, everything that's powered on. Are there other displays? Is there a ghost trolling motor? Are there, 0.1 GPS units? Do I have an engine connected? And it's actually going to go out and do a cursory check, and if I have a 0.1 GPS, it's going to probably use that as my GPS source. The next thing that you'll see on the screen is your registration. There are 3 things you can do from this screen. One is you can hit Get Started. It's going to ask if you want to turn the Wi-Fi hotspot on. If you do, it'll say this, and this is where this comes in handy. So you can actually register your phone. So what I've just done here is I have my Lowrance app already open. This is an app we have in the App Store that has built-in charting. With the Lowrance app, you can do, you can share your waypoints, routes, and trails. You can see that I've tested a lot around our office. You can see I've got some stuff when I go out to the lakes that are out there. My waypoints there, so I won't share those too much because I don't want you knowing where I caught one fish. But from here, you can actually go in and you can hit My Devices, and you can hit the plus button in the bottom, and you can actually add a device right here. It'll walk you through step by step. The chart plotter is powered on. Yes, I see the QR code. I scan the QR code, and now it asks me, do I want to register my HDS 16? It's that easy to register for warranty and all the other things that come with it. So with it, when it's registered, you get a little bit more than your standard warranty registration. You get customer service now knows what unit you have and also, you know, that it's connected to your account. Again, you can transfer your waypoints, routes, and trails. It's very persistent. It will not let me quit. Oh, because my phone's still trying to register with it. Hang on. I gotta cancel this first. I got ahead of myself when I put my phone down. We can beat you. So once you start the registration process, the phone's actually going to talk to the HDS internal Wi-Fi and pull its information, which I made the mistake of telling it to do that. So once it starts that, that's a process that can't be interrupted unless you do what I just do and turn the unit off. So we'll let it reboot here in a second, and I'll walk you back through the other two options. But yeah, so once with it registered, you can actually, from your Lowrance app, you can share waypoints, routes, and trails wirelessly between the units. It does register it for you, and it also makes service easier and quicker for us because we know exactly what you have, you know, when you bought it, when you registered, and all these other things. So it allows us to help you better, and it gives you some benefits of being able to, you know, use the app as well. The other thing you can do is you see at the bottom what's covered by my loading charts. It says, or complete your registration on the Lowrance website. It gives you the website to go to, lowrance.com, MFD registration, and then it gives you a device code. Once you give us the device code in this web page, we'll give you back a registration code, and again, you're registered. The other thing you can do is just hit Not Now. If I hit Not Now, it leaves, and I can come back whenever I want just by going in here and pressing the registration button. It will ask you for probably the first 3 to 5 power-ups if you want to register. If you keep saying Not Now, eventually we'll give you an option to just close the dialog. But registration is very important, not only for us as a company to know you, but very important for you to actually have your product registered. We know what we have. We can help you faster if you need it. The next thing I want to go into, and we're kind of running a little bit towards the end of our time here, but I want to do some basic setup that I can do in the garage. And some of the number one questions I always get are, you know, how do I pick my temperature? You know, how do I know I have the right temp source chosen? How do I know that my sonar is actually there and working? So what I'm going to do is, from the home page, I'm going to touch this little gear icon in the top corner. And now when I selected that auto configuration, it should have gone out and found everything anyway, but this is a way to double check and make sure. I'm going to pick network. I'm going to pick data sources. And now you see I have GPS, vessels, sonar, and time. So we're going to go to sonar. We're going to go to water temperature. So when I did the auto configure, it has automatically picked this unit channel 2 as my sonar source. It's 75 degrees in the shop here. It does not automatically have a depth selected because I don't have a depth lock. If I want this unit to use itself for depth, all I have to do is tick this box, and as soon as I get a depth lock, that'll pop up on my screen when I have overlays set up. The other thing you can do is, this boat has multiple GPSs, right? I've only got one of my 3 units turned on, but if I had my 12 or my 7 turned on, you'd see those here as well. By default, we go to auto. And auto basically picks the strongest performing GPS signal and uses that as the source. Me personally, I've put a 0.1 on this boat for a reason. One is I want to be able to use it for heading when I drive, but 2, I put that antenna right by my sonar transducer. So when I see something on my sonar screen and I drop a waypoint, I don't have the 6 feet of difference from where I think that waypoint is to where it actually is. I can put it right on it. So what I usually do for me, especially in situations where I have a 0.1, is I'll just go ahead and manually select the 0.1. That is now my GPS data source for this unit. The last thing I want to go through before we open up for Q&A is just a super quick run through of the sonar setup page. These top 4 buttons, or 3 buttons really, give people a lot of trouble, and I just kind of want to walk through and explain what they are. I'm going to skip the top 2 for now, and I'm going to go straight to network sonar mode. So with HDS Live, HDS Carbon, and HDS Gen 3, running the latest software, we have what's called multi-source mode. So on a boat like this, where I have a ghost trolling motor up front with its own HDI transducer, I have transducers off the back connected to multiple units. I could actually, with multi-source sonar mode, I can actually use any single one of those that I want to at a given time, or I could view 2 at a time on a side-by-side sonar split. So if I want to know the depth off the bow with the trolling motor down and the depth off the transom, I can do that. Older units, so Gen 2 Touch, Gen 2, and Gen 1, are not capable of running multi-source sonar mode. So if you have your HDS Live on a network with those units, you have to put it in single source mode. We've got videos that show you how to do this, but basically it's a process of you change a selection, you have to power down every unit and power down the boat, wait about 30 to 60 seconds, then power it all back up for it to reboot in the new mode. But that is, when you're in that mode, you can only look at one active sonar at a time, kind of like if you have, you can look at the transom transducer from anywhere on the boat, or you can look at the trolling motor transducer from anywhere on the boat, but you can't look at both. The last thing I want to talk about before we hop into questions is actually channel 1, channel 2. Channel 1 and channel 2 are set to automatically turn on if I automatically identify a transducer. So transducers like our active imaging 3-in-1, transducers like AirMar, transducers like LiveSight, those transducers have circuitry inside them that tell the HDS what they are. If you have something like a skimmer or an in-hole puck, they don't tell the unit what it is. So you see here, I actually have an in-hole puck on this boat, and I have an active imaging transducer off the back. My active imaging unit's there, but my sonar for channel 1 is turned off because there's no automatic ID. Since we installed this stuff, I know that there's a transducer on channel 1, so I can manually enable channel 1. Now I can go into the installation for channel 1 and I tell it what transducer type is there. This is very important. This tells the unit not only what sonar type to look for, but what frequencies can it do? Does it have temperature? You know, those kind of things. So I would go through my list. This is a PDT WBL. It's a pod transducer with, or actually it's a PDWBL, pod transducer with no temp. So now I pick that and I hit save, and now the unit knows that the sonar on channel 1 is capable of 200 kilohertz high chirp, 83 kilohertz medium chirp, but it does not have a temp source. So those are kind of some basic quick setup. Also, for most of us inland anglers, again, we chose lakes when we were setting this up. I take one further step once I'm on my sonar page, and I set this to either fresh or shallow. I'm mainly a shallow water fisherman, so I set it to shallow. Again, that helps the sonar learn to auto-tune a little bit better. And if it does lose bottom lock, or with the first time it's acquiring bottom lock, it's not searching 10,000 feet deep to try to find it. So the rest of the stuff we're going to have to leave till next week in terms of you know, unit setup, how to set your time and languages, page setups, quick split screens. But what I am going to do is I'm going to spend the next 5 or so minutes answering some of the questions that have just popped up on my computer that weren't necessarily answered in the live chat. Okay, the first one is actually a really hard one. So how can I verify that my NMEA 2000 network is working? From the home page, touch the gear icon, scroll down to network, go to diagnostics, and NMEA 2000. So if you see bus on and you don't see a lot of errors, so if you have a bad NMEA network or you have power in the wrong place or you don't have a terminator, your transmission and receive errors are going to start climbing. So here, since we've turned this network on, I've received almost 80,000 received messages with no errors, and my bus is clearly turned on. So if I don't have power on my NMEA bus, the bus will be off. If I have a bad network, a bad cable, a bad terminator, a missing terminator, I will start to get receive and transmit errors. So that's just a quick visual way. You don't even have to know what these words mean. Just look for bus state on and see if you're piling up a bunch of errors. It's not uncommon after a day of fishing to have a handful of errors, but if you see that number rapidly incrementing, you know something's wrong with your network. Engine N2K connectors, what engines and what do you get? So engine N2K connection varies by brand. We have some documents online that show how to connect. That's a whole webinar of its own to actually go into how to connect each one. But basically, to overly simplify it, almost every engine manufacturer sends us data via NMEA 2000. So again, you need the NMEA 2000 network. You need their gateway plugged into that network and then plugged in on their network side to their motor or their junction box. But what do you get with that? So by standard, we have this instruments page on our units, and almost every NMEA 2000 motor since 2005, 2006 outputs RPM, fuel flow. Some of them output fuel used. They output temperatures, engine hours, engine pressures. Some of them will do engine alarms. With companies that we have partnerships with, we actually can have dedicated pages. So that's Mercury, Yamaha, Suzuki, Evinrude, and Honda. But Honda doesn't do on our displays, but we do have a partnership with them. So with like Mercury Marine, when you connect a vessel view link a SmartCraft Vessel View link, you actually get a Mercury icon on the home screen. And when you touch that, you get way more than the basic RPM data. You can actually control the speed. If you wanted to set your motor for trolling, you can bump the increment of the RPM up or down. You can get diagnostic messages that we get those with Honda, Suzuki, Evinrude, and Yamaha. So basically, regardless the motor you run, you can make this HDS a full big engine display, again, depending on how it's connected. Follow the contour line. So again, this is gonna probably go more into, maybe we could probably dig in deeper into that, into the how to use. We don't actually, legally we aren't able to do follow the contour, but having a touch screen that's super easy to use, and again, that's one thing that I love about HDS is it's full touch and full key, is I can pick a contour line on any lake I want. I can just go over here to new, route, and then I can just tap along that contour. And now I've made a route on that contour that I can have my Ghost, my XI5, or my outboard pilot follow. How much performance do you lose with a shoot-through hole? For regular sonar, it's not typically too bad. Those frequencies shoot through very well. So when most fiberglass boat manufacturers, at least bass boat manufacturers, install the transducer shoot-through, and they track very, very well at speed. I mean, when I say at speed, I'm talking 50, 60, sometimes 70 miles an hour. One thing that you do lose if you try to shoot through the hole is if you have like an HDI style transducer. Yes, you can shoot an HDI style transducer through the hole, but those high frequency scanning type sonar from downscan don't penetrate the hole as well as the low frequencies do. So chances are 800 won't work. 455, you'll get about a 30% reduction in signal. Oh yeah, so one thing as we wrap up here, we will have this posted on Lowrance.com live later. So if you missed part, you came in late, and you want to see something that we didn't cover, you just want to watch it again because you like watching me sit in my shop so much, you guys are able to do that. What's the best way to update my units? The best way to update your units, the easiest way I think to update your units, there's two ways to do it. The easiest right now is to just go to Lowrance.com, download the file to an SD card. With the unit powered off, put the SD card in the card slot and turn the unit on, the update will run itself. For those of you guys that are a little bit more tech savvy, HDS live units do have built-in Wi-Fi. You can connect the built-in Wi-Fi to your home network and download the update directly to the unit and skip the need to have to go to the computer. I don't have time for the 4 ingredients to a sonar cake. I'll come back to that one. Would I say I'm an athlete? Maybe flex out for us. I'll save that for the next episode. So with that, I kind of do want to wind down a little bit. I've had an hour of your time. I really do appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to join us. I know that you've got other things to do, not as much as you normally would, but you still have other things you could do. So I appreciate you joining us. Remember to join us next week when we dig into some more of the actual features of the unit. And I do want to remind everybody that right after this, our partners at Angler Labs, on their Facebook page, facebook.com/Angler Labs. They have the second of their Wishing I Was Fishing series with host Shay Baker, and tonight's guest, I believe, is John Cox. So hop on over there, check that out. Once again, I want to thank my Lowrance crew for joining on the line and answering the questions. And don't forget to answer the survey when it comes out if I missed your question live. Thanks and have a good night.